Welcome back to the deepest depths of the underworld, where I have been spending a lot of time /maxing Garuda. Garuda is an insane frame which is not utilized a lot due to her rather deceiving kit, which is hard to fully understand. But don't worry, because this video will teach you exactly where you can harness her strength and make her shine. First, let's go over her abilities and her passive. Her passive is pretty easy to grasp. You eliminate enemies and you get 5% extra multiplicative damage, adding up to 100% total, which as far has been tested is a separate multiplicative damage source to any other types of damage increases. Dread Mirror, her first ability, is quite complicated and will need some time to introduce, so here we go. Dread Mirror is Garuda's main tool, offering both survivability as well as scaling damage based on enemy level and their damage output. Using Dread Mirror lets you jump towards enemies, after which you will deal slash damage, however this is without a slash status effect. The damage dealt is 10% of their maximum HP, but armor and other damage reduction will be taken into consideration, and this then differs itself from other damage scaling abilities such as Energy Vampire on Trinity for instance. When cast upon 40% of maximum HP left on an enemy, they will be instantly killed instead. Both attacks will charge your Blood Orb, which floats above your head, by 10% of max enemy HP for a normal Dread Mirror cast and 20% maximum HP for an insta-kill cast. Even if you don't continuously spam Dread Mirror, the orb will linger over your head until you either get killed or fall off the map. Dread Mirror also grants you a damage shield, which faces the direction of your aim. This shield is able to absorb all enemy damage and will convert 50% of this damage into damage stored in your Blood Orb. Holding down Dread Mirror lets you charge the orb for 50 energy per second, scaling with ability efficiency, and charging the orb will boost its damage by 100% of the initial starting damage every second. Be aware that charging your orb for too long will screw up damage calculations, leaving you better off hitting enemies with a wet spaghetti noodle. Finally, Dread Mirror on cast will give you a small time of full invincibility, useful for avoiding damage. So with Dread Mirror out of the way, let's jump to her second ability, Blood Altar. Blood Altar is a more straightforward ability. It offers another gap closer with a brief moment of invincibility, just like Dread Mirror. But in this case, it locks an enemy in place and provides a small area scaling with ability range, in which you are healed for 25% of your health every second, scaling with ability strength. You can use this ability to practically neutralize high priority threats in missions. If you want to release an enemy from the altar, you need to face it and recast your ability from anywhere, after which the enemy is dealt whatever damage they suffered while impaled. It is important to note that Blood Altar is also able to trigger Archon Intensify, which could help with build variety. Her third ability, Bloodletting, is another easy to understand ability but has some counterproductive scaling. When Bloodletting is cast, it will restore 40% of your maximum energy pool for the cost of 50% of your HP. This is based on your total final HP, meaning that using health mods on Garuda will not help scale this ability. Furthermore, after 2 casts, you will be unable to recast the ability, as you cannot cast it if you have 2 health remaining. You can restore energy using less than 50% of your HP, but you will gain the respective amount of energy for this back, so less than 40%. Bloodletting opens up many possibilities on Garuda for spam casting her abilities, as she will practically always have a way to gain considerable energy, so no expensive arcane energize is needed. Some ways to heal yourself can come in the form of healing mods, like on your melee weapon with Life Strike or Healing Return, but there's other good options as well, for instance Mold Reconstruct, which gives you back life on ability casts. And now for her final ability, Seeking Talons. So communication about what this ability does is absolutely piss poor, and it's probably why a lot of people might sleep on Garuda, but let me tell you, it's time to wake up. Seeking Talons applies slash procs to enemies within line of sight. The ability can be charged or cancelled by tapping twice. On full charge, enemies within 60 meters and within line of sight will suffer slash damage for a small duration, affected by ability duration, and they will be stunned in place if they don't have any overguard. Now reading further into this ability, the slash status % chance is where all the fun things begin to happen. At 134% ability strength, this will cap out at 100%, and what this does is that any enemy hit by this ability will suffer 100% of any damage instance dealt as additional slash damage, also applying a slash status effect. This means that damage from your first ability, Dread Mirror, and its thrown Blood Orb will now also deal slash damage, allowing you to hit into the multi-millions of slash procs, bypassing armor, without armor strip, and even without viral. Especially on higher levels, after which Dread Mirror will scale, this will do some considerable damage. So with that, all of her abilities are discussed, so now let me jump into the simulacrum, where I will further detail some of the builds that I have made and walk you through. Okay, so with the introduction out of the way, let me dive into some of the builds that I have designed over the last couple of days. The first thing that I want to point out is that some of these things will stay consistent throughout all of the builds. The first one is the companion. For most of the builds I'm using the Panzervulpaphyla with viral quills to proc viral on enemies. And I'm also using Tenacious Bond together with a rank 4 bite to get extra critical damage. The other thing that will stay consistent are the Archon Shards. I'm using one Tau-Forged Violet Archon Shard for electricity damage on my primary. I'm using two Tau-Forged Amber Archon Shards for casting speed. And I'm using two Emerald Archon Shards for full armor strip. For the Garuda build, it is a build using Xata's Whisper on her second ability, so I do not have Blood Altar anymore. I am using Mold Reconstruct to regain health after ability casts, and this regain of health is really nice because it helps me keep up my energy with Bloodletting. I'm then also using Arcane Aegis to proc a small duration of full invulnerability for 12 seconds, and in these 12 seconds I can then cast things like Dread Mirror, or I can get back my energy with Bloodletting, or I can do whatever I want to sort of keep the enemies away. Because this is an all-rounder build, I am using an Umbral mod setup. The Umbral mods are really nice because it increases my armor by quite a bit as well, and Garuda already has a high amount of base armor. This armor is also helpful if you opt to use Arcane Battery here instead. In that case you will get some crazy high energy pools, which can be nice, but for this particular case I didn't opt for that. I'm using a rank 4 Blind Rage. This is here because we want to shield gate with just the one Augur message mod, so just the one Augur mod. And in combination with catalyzing shields, either Xata's Whisper or Dread Mirror will fully regain our shields for the full shield gate duration, which in this case is 1.3 seconds. Rolling Guard is here because on some other builds I am using Overextended here. However, on the Xata's Whisper build you don't really need any extra range. So this is just another extra layer of full invulnerability for 3 seconds. It helps you cleanse some status effects, and it makes the build in general more easy to play and feel more smooth as well. Then I'm also using Primed Flow to increase the energy pool of Garuda. Garuda already has a really high base energy pool, so you end up with 912 energy, which is more than enough to cast everything that you need. And then Primed Continuity as well as the Augur Message are here for some extra duration. So we have a relatively long duration on our Seeking Talons, which is where most of the damage in this build comes from, because this is an extra damage instance for all of these different sources. The first weapon that I'm using is the Latron Prime Incarnon. I'm using the new semi-rifle cannonade mod, which locks your fire rate to 4.17 in this case. It gives you a good chunk of extra base damage, 240%, and some extra punch through. I'm using Primary Deadhead to get increased damage on headshots, as well as more base damage after we get headshot kills. Galvanized Chamber for the multi-shot. Critical Delay is really nice to combine with the new semi-rifle cannonade, because the minus fire rate will actually not apply, because as you see, this fire rate is now locked because of this new mod. I'm using Rifle Elementalist to both increase the damage of the electricity that I now have on this Latron because of my Archon Shard, the blast damage that's initially modded on it with Rime rounds and Thermite rounds, and it increases our slash procs that we get from Seeking Talons. And the reason why Seeking Talons is absolutely crazy is because Seeking Talons will proc on any type of damage, and it's also procced by blast damage and electricity damage. Then the slash damage that you get from it is increased by this mod, so it basically keeps dipping on itself with all of these calculations. Another thing that will be double dipping on this build will be the Prime Bane of Orokin. So I'm using this Bane mod. If you are facing different faction, make sure that you apply the correct Bane mod. Hammer Shot is here for extra status and extra critical damage as well. And I have no Riven on here at the moment, which is not necessary at all, as you will see in a short moment. The secondary, I have been using the Grimoire. The Grimoire is here with the Foam Invocation, which increases my ability strength after I do an alternate fire attack. Because I'm using the alternate fire, I have modded for a nice bit of fire rate to quickly get back the alternate fire ability. I'm using Barrel Diffusion, Amalgam Barrel Diffusion, for more dodge speed, and I'm using secondary Fortifier to get Overguard after I attack any enemies with Overguard. The electricity damage that's innately present is really nice because it also procs secondary Fortifier, so you can really quickly gain a maximum amount of Overguard if you have a group of Eximus units somewhere, or a group of units that has gained Overguard from an ancient healer, for instance. Then for melee, I opted to go with the Halikar Wraith. The Halikar Wraith might be better than the Glaive Prime in the current meta, and this is because the blast damage on it is really high. As I said, blast damage as well as electricity will both be able to proc slash damage instances from Seeking Talons, and together with melee influence, this changes the weapon into a complete room nuke, which it already is, but even more so after you apply Seeking Talons to enemies. Again, a Bane mod as well as the Elementalist mod to double dip or even triple dip. I don't know how many dips it is because you have so many damage instances, but it's a lot of damage anyhow. I'm using Full Auto Quick Return to have 2 blast procs in AoE, so you can throw your Halikar Wraith at the ground and it will blast for the first time, and then you can afterwards also do the heavy attack, which then procs it again to do an AoE blast attack. I have this Riven at the moment, which is initial combo and crit chance. However, it does have minus status chance, which is quite bad, so I will probably roll this a little bit more. If you want an optimal Riven, I would go for something like critical chance, critical damage initial combo, or melee damage, critical damage initial combo, or any kind of combination of those stats, and then a harmless negative is preferred as well. Also, don't forget to put electricity somewhere on your build so you can actually proc melee influence. So to quickly show you this against a couple of enemies, I will first show you the Latron Prime Incarnon. So you proc Seeking Talents on your enemies, get your Incarnon charge, and then the nice thing about the Latron Incarnon is that it will bounce the shots around as well, so you get a whole load of different damage instances going around, which then pretty much instant kills all of the enemies that you're shooting at. So let me just get them back and show it one more time. Put Seeking Talents on, 1 bullet, whole groups are gone either by the slash procs that follow afterwards or the initial damage. Then for the Grimoire, this is what you can see if you do the alternate fire in a big group of overguarded enemies. Instant, full overguard. And the funny thing is that the alternate fire is also able to proc some slash procs if you wanted to after you apply Seeking Talents. It will not be as high damage as the Latron Incarnon, but as you can see, it still sort of slowly chews through their health pools. Show you the Halikar Wraith. So get Xatas, get your Seeking Talons, and then throw it, and you can blast it twice. Now this was without melee influence, so let's keep throwing it until we proc melee influence. Okay, so once melee influence is procced, it will look a little bit different. It will look more like this, where everything is just gone in one throw. So one last thing that I forgot to mention about the Xata's Whisper build is that this also works together very well with a Kufa Sobek. So the Kufa Sobek has a special mod which is called Acid Shells, which scales off of enemy HP, and it deals a corrosive damage blast around enemies in a 15-meter radius. However, because Seeking Talents accepts any form of damage to turn into slash damage, you can use this to get a chain reaction going, just like how Saren with Toxic Lash is able to do this. So make sure that you have a Bane mod as well as the Shotgun Elementalist mod to increase the damage from all of these sources. And then, as you will be able to see, if I use this against a group of enemies and I have Xatas as well as Seeking Talons on, and all of the enemies are procced with Seeking Talons as well, which is important, I kill one of them, and then the slash procs will spread through this whole group and then kill everyone. So I can better illustrate this maybe with Eximus units. So let's get me some Eximus units in here. Here we go. Get Seeking Talons on. Kill one of them. And then it spreads through this entire group as long as they're close enough to kill everyone. And this also scales off enemy HP, which means that it will pretty much keep doing the same thing all the way up to level cap, as long as you are able to kill the first enemy. So that's it for the Xata's Whisper build that I have. Okay, so for the next build, this is based off a combination with Breach Surge, which is the helmet ability from Wisp. I again put this on the Blood Altar from Garuda. And then Seeking Talons will actually help Breach Surge deal not only radiation damage, but also slash damage. So if you have enemies without Overguard, this specifically doesn't work on overguarded enemies. So I can get half Eximus units and half normal units. And what you will see is that if I do Breach Surge and then Seeking Talons, that this guy will not have any sparks flying, but the other ones will start triggering the sparks. And that's pretty much all you need. One cast of Breach Surge and one cast of Seeking Talons is usually enough. You can cast it a couple of more times. And then slowly over time, these sparks that bounce around will keep damaging the enemies, and then at some point they will all start to die. So this takes a little bit long because there's overguarded enemies, so let me get rid of all of them and then just spawn in normal bombard so you can see. Group them together with Anomaly real quick. Breach Surge on them, Seeking Talons. You can see a lot of sparks flying around, and there was already a headshot and someone died, and then there it scales up and practically all of them are gone. So for the build it looks like this. Again, Mold Reconstruct as well as Arcane Aegis. Vigorous Swap is actually here because it increases the damage of both the sparks that you get from Breach Surge as well as damage from Seeking Talons. So if I show you again, I wasn't actually weapon swapping, which will help a lot as well. So let's get Breach Surge on these enemies. Let's get Seeking Talons on them. And then we begin swapping. And then this should scale a little bit quicker than it did last time. Yeah, so there you see they are dying a little bit faster. The third build that I want to get into uses Expedite Suffering. This is a helmet ability from the Infested helmets that you can get. And what this does is it condenses all slash and toxin damage into a single damage instance. But what actually happens is that the duplication of the slash damage, which you get from Seeking Talons, applies after you do the condensing of the slash damage. So you can have one slash proc that you keep increasing in damage exponentially based on the damage multiplier, which is in the tooltip at the moment 2.23 times. So as long as you have enemies that are not status immune or do not have status damage reduction, you can keep scaling this. So the best enemy to illustrate this with is a Juggernaut Behemoth, and here we have one. So we do Seeking Talons, and then we cast a bunch of Expedite Suffering, and as you will be able to see, you can get a really big slash proc, which in this case was damage cap. Now, as you might have seen, I also turned invisible. This is because I'm using a Ures Kubro on this build instead. The Stalk mod will make you invisible, and you can still cast your abilities. The only thing you cannot do is attack either with a melee attack or fire your weapon. This will break the invisibility. But as long as you're only casting abilities, you will remain invisible, and you can use this to really easily survive in missions and just use your Seeking Talons Expedite Suffering combination to kill off any enemies. So this works well in a disruption, but less so in a survival where you need to have a high KPM. The Expedite Suffering build looks like the following. It again uses some shield gating as well as Mold Reconstruct to get the health back for Bloodletting to keep the energy up. I'm then using Mod Augmented instead, which gives me extra ability strength, helping to scale the multiplier that you get here. And then I have modded for a little bit more range, and Natural Talent is here to increase the speed at which we can cast Expedite Suffering, because it's a relatively long animation, so the faster you can spam this and exponentially increase your damage, the better, especially if you're using this in Disruption, because the Nullifier Bubble will get rid of your Seeking Talon status chance effect. So what you want is to cast this ability when the Nullifier Bubble is down, cast a bunch of Expedite Suffering, then if the Nullifier Bubble is activated again, cast Seeking Talons again, and then go back to doing more Expedite Suffering. If you don't do this and you don't cast Seeking Talons after the Nullifier Bubble has been reactivated on the demo list, you will lose the slash proc that's on them, and you cannot scale it any further with Expedite Suffering. So because Expedited Suffering worked so well, I figured out that Harmony might be really good on Garuda as well, because this basically does the same thing, but it's packaged in a melee weapon. So for the Harmony build, I went with Wrathful Advance. I'm using this to get a bunch of extra critical chance for the melee, and this will also actually be a heavy attack, and I will explain why this is important in a little bit. This also has a small period of invulnerability, just like you have with Dreadmere or Blood Altar on Garuda's main kit. Harmony itself is a melee weapon that is able to consume all of the status effects or damage over time effects into a single instance, which it then deals, which is exactly the same as Expedite Suffering. And what's again funny is that Seeking Talons will apply the slash status that you get from it all the way at the end of the calculation again, so you can keep scaling the slash proc just like with Expedite Suffering, but in this case with Harmony. Now the way you do this, and you can do this even faster with Harmony than with Expedite Suffering, is by using Melee Afflictions. This is because on heavy attacks with scythe weapons, you will proc Melee Afflictions, so as long as enemies are not stun locked by Magus Lockdown or a cold effect, you can use Melee Afflictions to keep applying more slash procs onto the enemy, which will then instantly be consumed by Harmony, which will then afterward trigger a higher status damage instance back on the enemy with Seeking Talons, and then you do another heavy attack, and again you just reiterate, you get Melee Afflictions buff again, you consume the previous slash proc, which is now bigger than it was before, and then you keep and keep scaling it. So again, the best way to show this is with the Juggernaut Behemoth. Then again, it's as easy as casting your Seeking Talons, then casting your Wrathful Advance a couple of times, and then it's 200,000, 2 million, and then now it's 30 million. So you can see this scales a lot quicker than it would with Expedite Suffering, which needs a lot more casts. So here you can just scale it with Harmony instead. And 1.2 million and 21 million. So yeah, this is a pretty good combination as well. Another way in which I can illustrate that Harmony is able to easily damage cap is by just spawning in a single enemy, which I put on a Blood Altar. So there we go. And we get Seeking Talons on this enemy, get Harmony out, 1 heavy, 2 heavy, 3, 4, that's probably already enough, 900 million, not quite enough, so it probably needs 1 more. So it needs 5, so let's do 5 instead. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this should be it. There's damage cap. So that's pretty much that for the melee builds. And with that, I think I have covered all of the builds that I wanted to show you. I will have some extra gameplay all the way at the end here, using the Xata's Whisper build as well as the Harmony build in a Disruption. And with that, I would like to thank you all for tuning in. I hope to see you in the next video. If you did like this guide, I put quite some time in it, coming up with these builds. I wanted to make sure that all of them worked well, and I understood what was going on, so I can give you the best information that's out there. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments. Also make sure to subscribe if you want to get more Warframe content coming to you very soon. Bye.